Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected legends sits across from one of daytime TV's most outspoken hosts? You get a moment that everyone talks about for days. On a recent episode of The View, the atmosphere turned electric when 91-year-old actor Michael Caine joined the panel to discuss whether Hollywood should celebrate senior actors more often. What started as a thoughtful conversation about aging and legacy quickly turned tense when Joy Behar suggested that Hollywood owes nothing to nostalgia. Michael, known for his sharp British wit and grace, didn't take that lightly. He leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting, reminding the table that experience isn't nostalgia, it's the foundation the industry stands on. Joy pushed back, claiming that audiences want fresh faces and new energy. The back and forth drew gasps, applause, and even a few awkward silences from the co-hosts. By the time Whoopi tried to mediate, it was clear this wasn't just about movies. It was about respect, about whether a lifetime of work still matters in a culture obsessed with youth. What followed was one of The View's most emotional debates yet, a reminder that sometimes wisdom doesn't fade with age, it only sharpens. The camera lights flared as The View's familiar theme music faded. Whoopi Goldberg turned to the camera with that measured calm that usually meant she knew something big was about to happen. "Today we have a true legend at the table," she began, smiling toward the guest seat. "An actor whose career has spanned more than 6 decades, from Alfie to The Dark Knight. Please welcome Sir Michael Caine." The audience erupted in applause. Michael gave a modest wave, leaning on his cane but moving with quiet dignity. Joy Behar clapped as well, but her expression hinted at something between curiosity and skepticism. "Welcome, Michael," Joy said as he sat down. "It's not often we get someone here who's been in the business since before most of us were born." The audience laughed awkwardly. Michael chuckled too, but there was a flicker in his eyes that said he caught the tone. "Well, Joy," he said evenly, "I suppose that means I've lasted long enough to see the industry grow and, in some ways, forget where it came from." Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "That's a perfect segue, actually. Today's topic: should Hollywood celebrate senior actors more often?" Sonny Hostin jumped in first. "I think there's a cultural bias toward youth, especially in entertainment. We value beauty and energy, but often at the cost of wisdom and craft." Joy leaned forward. "But isn't that the natural order of things? Every generation has its turn. You can't keep making room for the past when the present keeps moving." Michael smiled thinly. "I don't see experience as the past. I see it as the very reason film has depth. The craft didn't start with TikTok stars and Instagram influencers." The audience chuckled. Joy crossed her arms, clearly not amused. "Oh, come on, Michael. You can't tell me you don't see the value in new voices. It's not 1970 anymore." Michael nodded slowly. "Of course I do. But the problem isn't new voices, it's that the old ones are being silenced. When you reach a certain age, studios stop calling, awards stop recognizing. It's as if we've decided that aging means becoming invisible." The studio went still. Even Whoopi nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You're not wrong there," she said. "Hollywood tends to push people out once they've hit a certain number." Joy, sensing the sympathy in the room, pushed back. "But audiences drive that, not studios. If people wanted to see 80-year-olds headlining movies, that's what studios would make. It's supply and demand." Michael looked directly at her. "Joy, I've been in films that made millions long after I turned 70. The Dark Knight, Inception. The audience never had a problem with my age. The industry did." The crowd clapped loudly at that one. Anna Navarro leaned in. "You know, Michael, there's something beautiful about longevity in this business, but don't you think there's a difference between celebrating legacy and clinging to relevance?" Michael smiled. "Anna, I don't cling to anything. I adapt. That's what kept me here. But when experience is dismissed purely because it doesn't trend on Twitter, that's not adaptation, that's erasure." Joy exhaled sharply. "You sound like you think there's a conspiracy against older actors." "I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's a symptom. We've built an industry that confuses youth with creativity. It's easier to sell energy than depth." The audience murmured in agreement. Whoopi, sensing the moment deepening, leaned back. "So, Joy, are you saying that older actors shouldn't be celebrated just because time moves on?" Joy shrugged. I'm saying nostalgia clouds judgment. Sometimes we overpraise the old because it feels good, but that doesn't mean today's generation doesn't have just as much talent. Michael smiled faintly. It's not about overpraise. It's about balance. You can celebrate the new without burying the old. Sonny added quietly, but there's a moral undertone here too. If society treats age like a flaw, it trickles down everywhere. Workplaces, families, communities. Maybe Hollywood just reflects that. Michael nodded, his voice lower now. Exactly. The movies teach us what to value. When the heroes stop aging on screen, we start fearing it in real life. That line landed hard. The studio fell silent before a wave of applause swept across the audience. Joy rolled her eyes, but smiled tightly, trying to play off the tension. All right, Sir Michael, that was poetic, but maybe we just need to accept that entertainment changes. You had your era, now it's theirs. Michael tilted his head, almost pitying her tone. My era built the foundation your era stands on. I only ask that it not be forgotten. Whoopi gestured toward the audience, who applauded again, this time louder. All right, folks, she said, half smiling, I think we've got a fiery one brewing. And she was right. Because the polite smiles were fading, the applause was starting to sound divided, and the debate was only just beginning to spark.
The atmosphere in the View studio was shifting fast. The initial warmth of nostalgia had given way to sharp tension that even the audience could feel. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, eyes darting between Joy Behar and Michael Caine, like a referee watching a match pick up pace. Joy rested her elbow on the table, a faint smirk on her lips. You talk about Hollywood forgetting people, Michael, but isn't that just life? We all move on. Nobody stays in the spotlight forever. Michael gave a slow nod. That's true, Joy, but moving on isn't the same as pushing out. There's a difference between natural change and deliberate disregard. Joy laughed under her breath. Deliberate disregard? You make it sound like there's a secret meeting in Los Angeles where they say, all right, who do we erase next? Michael's tone remained calm, but his eyes didn't waver. No secret meeting, just an unspoken rule. When your hair turns gray, so does your relevance. That line drew a mix of laughs and uneasy murmurs from the crowd. Sonny Hostin interjected, trying to lighten the mood. Well, I think the real issue might be that the business moves faster now. People are consuming content in seconds, not hours. That leaves less space for the kind of storytelling older actors built their careers on. Michael nodded in agreement. That's true, but speed doesn't mean substance has to die. Storytelling used to be about connection. Now it's about clicks. Joy cut in sharply. Or maybe audiences just don't want to be lectured by people who had their turn. Times change, Michael. Maybe Hollywood isn't ageist, it's just evolving. The crowd reacted with a low murmur. Michael turned toward her fully now, hands clasped on the table. Evolving is fine. Erasing isn't. When I started, the people before me, like Laurence Olivier, were revered. Now, actors barely know the names of those who came before them. Whoopi nodded knowingly. He's got a point there. When I came up, we studied people like Sidney Poitier, not just watched clips on YouTube. Joy crossed her arms. Okay, but young people today are creative in their own right. They've got their own platforms, their own audiences. You can't blame them for not worshiping the past. Michael smiled faintly. Not worshiping, just respecting. Respecting the road that got them here. Ana Navarro leaned in, eyes glinting with curiosity. Michael, do you think the younger generation even wants that kind of mentorship anymore? A lot of them seem more interested in going viral than being trained. That's exactly my concern, Michael said. When fame becomes more important than craft, the art loses its soul. The crowd burst into applause again. Joy tapped her pen against the table impatiently. But people want to be entertained, not educated. You're acting like Hollywood has some moral duty to keep handing out respect badges. Michael chuckled softly. Joy, movies shape morals. They show people what to value, what to admire. When we stop valuing experience, we tell the world that aging is something to hide. Whoopi looked toward the camera. That's an interesting point. We're talking about more than movies now. We're talking about how society treats getting older. Michael nodded. Exactly. The industry is a mirror. If it only reflects youth, people will fear growing old. That's dangerous. Joy leaned forward again, her tone sharp. Dangerous? Isn't that a bit dramatic? Michael turned toward her, voice steady but firm. I've seen brilliant actors, people who gave their whole lives to this craft, reduced to punchlines once they hit 70. If that's not dangerous, I don't know what is. The audience reacted audibly, with a mix of gasps and applause. Joy sighed, glancing at Whoopi. So what's the solution then, Michael? You want quotas for older actors, mandatory senior roles in every movie? Michael smiled. No, just opportunity. Let talent, not age, be the deciding factor. We've made progress in diversity, inclusion, and representation. Why should age be the last acceptable bias? That line drew thunderous applause. Even Sonny smiled, clapping along. He's right about that. We celebrate progress, but ageism is still treated like a punchline. Joy wasn't ready to concede. But let's be honest, she said, some older actors can't adapt to modern filmmaking. They don't want to do streaming, social media, all that comes with staying relevant. Michael replied quietly, and yet, some of us are still here, aren't we? Maybe it's not that we can't adapt. Maybe it's that Hollywood doesn't know what to do with us once we do. The crowd whistled and applauded. Whoopi raised her hand, trying to calm the noise. Okay, let's breathe, people. I think both sides have a point here. Joy shook her head. I just think this nostalgia talk is overblown. Every generation thinks the next one is ruining something. Michael's gaze softened slightly, though his tone remained steady. You might be right about that, but it's not about blame, it's about preservation. If we lose sight of the past, we lose our compass for the future. Whoopi smiled knowingly. You're saying Hollywood needs both memory and movement. Exactly. We need young energy and old wisdom working together, not replacing one another. The audience clapped again, this time longer and louder. But Joy wasn't done. She said, all that sounds lovely, but this industry runs on youth. It always has, so maybe the rest of us are just being realistic. Michael tilted his head, his expression calm but unyielding. Realism without compassion is just cynicism. The audience erupted into applause again, and for a moment, Joy looked genuinely caught off guard. Whoopi leaned forward, grinning. Okay, I think we're about to see this one go from polite to passionate. She was right. The smiles were tighter now, the laughs shorter. What began as a discussion about recognition was turning into a clash of values, youth versus wisdom, relevance versus respect, and the real storm was just starting to form behind Michael's calm eyes. The studio had gone quiet after Michael Caine's last comment, the kind of quiet that hums with tension. Joy crossed her arms, tapping her fingers against her sleeve. So, let me get this straight, she said slowly. You think Hollywood is intentionally sidelining older actors, that there's some sort of conspiracy against people your age? Michael chuckled, not kindly this time. It's not a conspiracy, Joy. It's convenience. They want fast faces, not familiar ones, fresh voices, not wise ones, and in the process, they're tossing away decades of experience as if it were yesterday's news. Joy lifted her brows. Or maybe audiences just want something different. Maybe they don't want to watch the same people they grew up with still playing leads. Times change, Michael. He looked right at her, and for the first time his voice sharpened. That's not change. That's ageism with a smile. The audience gasped. Whoopi raised her hand as if to cool things down, but Caine was just getting started. I've worked with actors who could outact most of Hollywood with their eyes closed, but they can't get auditions now because they're 50, 60, 70, because they've got laugh lines and real hair instead of sprayed plastic. You call that progress? Joy shot back. But aren't there older actors still working? Look at Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep is the exception used to excuse the problem. You name one woman, One man who's allowed to exist past 60 and Hollywood points to them like a trophy. It's not equality, it's tokenism. The crowd erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs. Whoopi raised her hand as if to cool things down, but Caine was just getting started. I've worked with actors who could outact most of Hollywood with their eyes closed, but they can't get auditions now because they're 50, 60, 70, because they've got laugh lines and real hair instead of sprayed plastic. You call that progress? Joy shot back. But aren't there older actors still working? Look at Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep is the exception used to excuse the problem. You name one woman, one man who's allowed to exist past 60 and Hollywood points to them like a trophy. It's not equality, it's tokenism. The crowd erupted into a mix of applause and murmurs. Joy leaned forward. You sound bitter. Michael smiled faintly. I'm not bitter. I'm disappointed. I grew up in an era when experience mattered, when a director didn't just want your face, they wanted your wisdom. Today, they want your follower count. Even Whoopi couldn't help but nod slightly. He's got a point, she murmured. But Joy wasn't backing down. I think you're underestimating audiences. People still love good stories. It's not about age, it's about relevance. Michael's reply was quiet, but cut deep. And you think the two are separate? You think stories about growing older, about reflection, about legacy aren't relevant? Maybe they'd be relevant if someone let them be told. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Joy looked around, a flicker of frustration passing through her expression. Look, I get that it's personal for you, but the industry is evolving. It's about diversity, about giving new voices a chance. And I agree with that, Michael said quickly. But why does new have to mean young? Why can't it mean different? Why can't it include the people who built this industry? There's room for everyone if we stop pretending age is an expiration date. That landed hard. For a long moment, Joy didn't reply. She shifted her papers, then said, maybe audiences just don't want to see older people fall in love or save the day anymore. Maybe that's not what sells. Michael looked genuinely sad now. That's exactly my point. Somewhere along the way, we stopped believing that older people have dreams worth watching. That hit home. A woman in the audience shouted, "You tell her, Michael!" And the crowd laughed. Whoopi forced a smile, but her tone softened. So what do you want then? More films about aging? About nostalgia? Michael leaned back, his voice steady but full of heart. I want balance. I want kids to see that their heroes don't have to vanish when they turn 50. I want Hollywood to remember that growing older isn't a tragedy. It's proof that you've lived. That line drew a full standing ovation. Even Joy seemed a little shaken. You make it sound noble, she said, almost quietly. It is noble, he replied. We're the stories we leave behind. And if Hollywood forgets that, it'll forget what storytelling means. The applause rose again, echoing through the studio. Joy stared down at her notes for a long moment, then looked back up. Well, she said finally, you certainly gave us something to think about. Michael smiled. That's all I ever wanted to do. The tension had broken, but not completely. Underneath the applause, there was still that hum of disagreement, the sense that something raw had been touched. The flashpoint had passed, but the fire was still burning.
The applause from Michael's last line hadn't even faded before Joy leaned forward again, her tone taking on that familiar sharp edge. So, Michael, she began, her voice cool but with a hint of challenge. You talk about legacy and respect for older actors, but let me ask you this. Aren't you part of the reason younger actors struggle to find opportunities? If Hollywood kept giving all the good roles to veterans, where would the next generation go? The audience murmured at that. It was a clever turn, classic Joy. Michael smiled, but there was no humor in it. That's not what I'm saying, Joy. I've spent my entire career helping younger actors, mentoring them, fighting to get them seen. What I'm asking for is balance, not dominance, just fairness." Joy pressed on. "But don't you think every generation says the same thing? The ones who came before you probably said the same thing about you when you started." Michael let out a soft laugh. "They did, and they were right to. But back then, I earned my spot by learning from them, not replacing them." The crowd reacted, clapping, cheering. Joy rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Michael. Hollywood doesn't work like that anymore. It's faster, it's global, it's about connection. Social media gives everyone a voice. And yet somehow," he said, his voice tightening, "the loudest voices are the shallowest ones." That line hit like a slap. Joy bristled. "That's unfair to a whole generation of creators who are trying to tell their stories in new ways." Michael didn't flinch. "And it's unfair to a generation who built the road they're walking on, only to be told they're in the way." The audience broke into applause again, but now the tone was split, half cheering for him, half murmuring uneasily. Joy tried to regain control. "You make it sound like Hollywood has turned into some kind of villain. It's still a business. It's not personal." Michael leaned in, eyes unwavering. "It's always personal when the people you've worked with for decades stop calling you back, when the roles get smaller and the calls get shorter, when the same people who used to say, 'We can't do this movie without you,' suddenly forget your number." That silenced her. The set was quiet now, the lights feeling hotter, the air thicker. Even the crew seemed frozen behind the cameras. Michael continued, slower this time, voice weighted with age and truth. "You know, Joy, I don't need sympathy. I've had a wonderful career. But I look around and see my friends, actors, directors, crew, people who gave their lives to this business, and they're treated like they've expired, not because they can't perform, but because they've aged out of what's fashionable." He paused. "And I can't help but think, if this is how we treat people who've given their hearts to the craft, what does that say about the rest of us?" Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Whoopi spoke up softly. "He's right, Joy. We all feel it. Every industry's got it. You hit a certain age and suddenly you're invisible." Joy looked between them both, suddenly defensive. "But what are we supposed to do? Force the audience to watch older actors? Make studios hire people they think won't bring in numbers?" Michael's reply was quiet, but cutting. "No, we remind them that numbers aren't everything, that art is supposed to mean something, that storytelling isn't about youth, it's about humanity, and that doesn't have an age limit." That earned him another wave of applause, louder than before. Joy sighed, visibly irritated. "You're very good at making it sound poetic, Michael, but the industry moves on. You can't cling to the past." He smiled faintly. "And maybe that's the problem, Joy. Everyone's so busy moving on, no one's remembering what we're leaving behind." That line, simple, almost whispered, was the breaking point. The studio audience erupted in a standing ovation. Some even shouted his name. The co-hosts exchanged glances, half impressed, half stunned. Joy sat back in her chair, stone-faced. Michael didn't gloat. He just looked down for a moment, then back up at her. "You know," he said softly, "I didn't come here to win an argument. I came here hoping someone would listen." And with that, he stood. The camera followed him as he straightened his jacket and gave the audience a small nod of gratitude. "Thank you for hearing me," he said, voice steady. The applause followed him as he left the stage, calm, dignified, unshaken. Joy watched him go, her usual quick retort nowhere to be found. The show wasn't over, but something inside it had shifted. The debate had turned into something more than disagreement. It had become a mirror, and everyone watching had just seen a reflection they couldn't ignore. As the applause faded and the credits rolled, something rare hung in the studio air. Silence. Not awkward, but thoughtful. Even Joy Behar, known for always having the last word, sat unusually still, eyes fixed on the stage where Michael Caine had just stood. Whoopi turned toward her. "You okay, Joy?" she asked gently, her tone almost teasing, but lined with curiosity. Joy exhaled, a small, humorless laugh escaping her. "You know what, Whoopi? I didn't expect them to get to me like that."
The audience, still seated, seemed to lean in. Whoopi smiled knowingly. That's what happens when you have someone who's lived through every version of this business. He's not just talking about Hollywood. He's talking about life. Joy nodded slowly, her expression softening. Maybe he's right, she admitted. Maybe I got so used to defending the new world, I forgot that the old one built the foundation for it. The words surprised even her. The camera, still rolling for the post-show segment, caught something rare, a moment of reflection instead of rivalry. In the control booth, the producer whispered, "Don't cut, let it breathe." And so it did. Joy looked into the camera, speaking not as a host, but as a woman reckoning with her own place in time. You know, when Michael said Hollywood forgets people, it hit me, because I've seen it happen right here on this show. People age out, viewers move on, and we don't even stop to say thank you. The crowd was quiet again, moved by her honesty. Whoopi reached over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Well," she said, smiling faintly, "maybe this is us saying it." Cut to backstage. Michael was standing alone, sipping a cup of tea, his jacket draped over one arm. One of the younger producers approached, maybe late 20s, clearly nervous. "Sir, I just wanted to say, that was incredible. My grandfather used to make me watch your movies. I didn't get them back then, but now, I think I do." Michael smiled kindly. "That's the point, son. Some stories grow on you when life catches up." The producer nodded, a little choked up. "Thank you for saying what you said in there. My generation needed to hear that." Michael gave a small nod. "And my generation needed to know someone was listening." The moment lingered, simple, human, true. Back on the stage, Joy looked toward the audience again. "You know," she said, with a light laugh, "I gave Michael a hard time today, but maybe that's what these conversations are supposed to do, make us uncomfortable enough to see the truth." The audience clapped softly, not the wild applause of before, but something warmer, respectful. Whoopi leaned back, smiling. "That's the beauty of it, Joy. You don't have to agree to understand." Later that night, the segment went viral, not because of shouting or insults, but because of one line. "Everyone's so busy moving on, no one's remembering what we're leaving behind." It spread across social media, shared, quoted, stitched into countless posts. Younger viewers wrote things like, "I never thought about it that way." Older ones replied, "We've been waiting for someone to say this." For once, the internet wasn't divided, it was reflecting. By the next morning, even major news outlets picked it up. Headlines read, "Michael Caine's powerful message on age, art, and legacy resonates across generations." When asked about it later, Michael only smiled and said, "I wasn't trying to make headlines. I was just trying to remind people that every generation owes something to the one before it." It was the kind of quiet wisdom that didn't trend often, but this time it did. And somewhere, maybe even off camera, Joy Behar, never one to back down from a fight, found herself thinking about that truth longer than she expected. Because beneath all the banter, all the debate, and all the differences, Michael Caine had done something rare on The View. He didn't win an argument. He restored a little respect. If you liked this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more unforgettable TV clashes, emotional showdowns, and conversations that hit deeper than expected. Drop a comment below. Do you think Hollywood still values its legends, or are they being left behind?